So this big article came out in the New York Times. We're going to literally read it word for word in our State of the Game and discuss it as we go, because everything in it is massively important in terms of how this could shape the future of reality television production, specifically the dating shows, in my opinion. So let's begin it. Here we go.
Speaking of.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I can't access the article. Can you copy and paste it in this?
How does I do that? Let's
open
see.
the article, go Control A, Control C, and then open the doc and go Control V.
C, Control what? All right, I'm going to just try this.
It's to select all, copy.
I know how to copy and paste. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
It's in there. It's in there for you.
Great.
The bigger question is, how can you not access it?
You have to log into New York Times.
You just got to log into Gmail. Anyways, let's begin.
Wait,
are you ready?
You can just use an email?
Yeah. They let you have like 3 or 4 free articles. This is also, the State of the Game is also how to read a New York Times article is now being discussed
Look,
as well.
I read my articles on TikTok.
Okay. Here we go. This is
to be read to me.
Written by Julia Jacobs, and it came out December 11th, yesterday at noon. We are recording this on Thursday. The headline is Labor Board classifies Love is Blind contestants as employees. The sub headline is the National Labor Relations Board's case against the Netflix hit could have ripple effects across the reality TV industry. Let's begin. The National Labor Relations Board issued a complaint against the hit reality show Love is Blind on Wednesday, in which it classified the show's contestants as employees, opening a case that could have ripple effects across the reality television industry. The complaint by the Labor Board's regional office in Minnesota says that the show committed several labor violations, including unlawful contractual terms related to confidentiality and non-compete provisions. Let's take a pause and now look at this. Let's talk about what we've just read. This is the National Labor Relations Board has issued a formal legal complaint against Netflix, Kinetic Content, that's Chris Cohen's company who does Love is Blind, all of this. And they're saying that
NLRB versus NRU.
Nice. I like that. NLRB versus NRU rolls right off the tongue. These they're basically saying that it's unlawful to have in the contract the confidentiality clause and the non-compete provisions. That's one part of this. That's the part where it says you can't talk about our show and you can't go on another show for X amount of time after your season completes. Let's continue. By classifying the cast members who date and sometimes marry other singles on the show as employees with certain federal legal protections, the complaint opens the door to possible unionization. It is one of the Labor Board's first forays into reality television and a major development in the effort by some on-screen personalities to change the industry through the legal system. So this, in the third paragraph of this article, it's already saying this is a pathway to unionization, something we have talked about on the show for literal years. We know Bethany Frankel is kind of mounting some effort to try and get this to happen, but this seems to me like the first real step in that direction. Yes, this is the Federal Labor Board basically saying the contracts that you're using in these reality shows are unlawful. Fascinating to me.
Several contestants on Love is Blind, which streams on Netflix and has been one of the buzziest dating shows since its debut in 2020, have come forward in lawsuits, in interviews, and on social media with objections to the restrictions outlined in their contracts. One contestant, Renee Poche, became involved in a legal dispute with the show after she publicly accused the production of allowing her to become engaged in front of TV cameras to a man, quote, who was unemployed with a negative balance in his bank account. She said in court papers that after she had made, quote, limited public remarks about her distressing time on the program, one of the companies behind the production initiated arbitration proceedings against her, accusing her of violating her non-disclosure agreement and seeking $4 million. Poche, a veterinarian who lives in Texas, said she had earned a stipend of $1,000 per week, adding up to a total of $8,000.
So this is just a little
definitely
background.
Talked about the Renee Poche piece. There's a lot more to this, including the producers telling, or her telling producers she had a fear of this man and he had a gun. And
So yeah, the rest of this, or this little chunk of the article, is kind of giving you some backstory to the various legal tangles that Netflix and Connect Content has found themselves in over the past year or so. And here it continues. The two Love is Blind participants, Poche and Nick Thompson, submitted complaints to the labor board, resulting in an investigation into the policies and practices of the production companies behind the show, which include Kinetic Content and Delirium TV. A lawyer representing the production companies declined to comment. Representatives for Netflix, which streams the show but is not listed in the complaint, did not respond to a request for comment. Yeah, no
Classic.
shit. A Love is Blind
Wait, you want to make our shows way more expensive to produce and not have as much control over?
We'll probably talk about this when we finish reading the article too, but what is happening right here is a production practices that have been in place for literal decades. I would say since the 90s, really, with Real World. And I mean, the Jenny Jones case, that's a big one. Go back and read about it. If you don't know about the Jenny Jones case, Warner Brothers basically successfully defended after an appeal the fact that Jenny Jones did an episode where it was people would come on and reveal their secret crushes. A guy came on, revealed his crush to a male friend. That male friend then killed that man like a week after the show aired or something like this. And that man's family then sued Jenny Jones, Warner Brothers, won the lawsuit initially, saying that the show was accountable for those actions. But then Warner Brothers successfully appealed it. And that appeal, because it won, got the case resolved. No one owed anyone money. And the contract they use that says we are completely not responsible for anything that happens as a result of you appearing in the show has been in place basically since that time. Let's move on in this article. A Love is Blind season features 30 singles who date one another from separate rooms known as pods. Their conversations are fed through speakers and they do not see whom they are talking with unless they decide to become engaged. A commitment that also comes with a wedding where they can say I do or walk away. The production companies have long defended their treatment of the cast members, arguing that every decision the contestants make is up to them. We document, this is a quote from Chris Cullen now. We document the independent choices of adults who volunteer to participate in a social experiment, the show's creator Chris Cullen said in a statement to People magazine amid complaints last year, their journey, quote, is not scripted nor is it filmed around the clock. We have no knowledge or control over what occurs in private living spaces when not filming, and participants may choose to end their journey at any time. This is just spin. It is spin control. To say that they don't do anything. We document the independent choices of adults.
They just document it.
Exactly. Do they? Because I'm pretty sure you hire two hosts named the Lachey's who are paid millions of dollars to do this. I'm pretty sure you force them into situations they wouldn't normally be in. Like when you have the third parties of love triangles come back to try and blow up relationships, or you send them to a strip club, or you tell the women, you guys are going to go out and party at this club. Do you remember that season where the guy Matt and Colleen was her name, I think, got into a huge fight because the producers basically took all the women out to an after party, sent the guys home, and the dude was like, what the fuck, you're going out and partying without me? And it was like, well, no, the producers made us do that. So that's a straight lie.
And
that it's not
having
it
in
them.
The contract that if they don't show up to the rematching or divorcing ceremony, that they have to pay $50,000. Other things like that are influencing whether this is just a documentary of a social experiment.
That exact thing is in this article a little bit later, and we will get to it. We have a little bit more of the article, and then we can have a general conversation about this. I just find it fascinating. In defending themselves against legal actions, the companies have asserted that the show's participants are not employees. The labor board's complaint demands that the show reclassify its participants as employees and rescind what it calls unlawful contractual provisions. Now, if this happens, if they have to qualify people on reality TV as employees, they will then fall under all the protections granted to them by labor laws. And that's where you start to get into like a unionization push, because it's a very specific kind of work that has its own, specific parameters that may need to be looked at under heavier scrutiny and have some kind of charter drawn up about, well, what can you do? It's like what Screen Actors Guild is, or Writers Guild, or Directors Guild. It would basically be like that. You have to have
breaks this many hours. You have to have food. You have to be allowed to go to the bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. Where are we? Complaints?
Complaints are issued, yeah.
Complaints are issued after a labor board regional office concludes that there is merit to accusations that have been made against an employer. They are then litigated before an administrative law judge who will determine whether the employer has violated the law. The employers could appeal a decision to the National Labor Board in Washington. In a statement, Brian Friedman, a lawyer representing Poche and several other reality television litigants outside Love is Blind, said in a statement on Wednesday that he thought the labor complaint had the potential to transform the industry.
This first part of this paragraph where it says that the employers could appeal a decision to the National Labor Board in Washington, I think that will happen. I think this initial decision is going to be against Netflix, against Kinetic. It's going to say that you have to treat them as employees, which means they are covered and protected under all kinds of labor laws. They're going to appeal that because it will drastically alter the way they are producing these reality TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to
cost a lot more money to them.
Not only a lot more money, there's going to be a lot of the psychological tactics that they use, especially in Bachelor, sleep deprivation, keeping them drunk, not giving them food. All of that is out the window. Let's move on.
Signing away their civil rights, for instance.
The contracts will have to be changed for sure. So Brian Friedman, this lawyer, goes on to say cast members are stripped of fundamental rights, gagged from speaking out, denied legal recourse, paid virtually nothing, subjected to the ever-present threat of ruinous liquidated damages, and prevented from working elsewhere. These practices must stop. This is what we've been talking about. In the world of reality television, where wild on-screen behavior is often rewarded with higher ratings, production companies have long sought to reduce their exposure to litigation with tightly written contracts laden with confidentiality provisions and other restrictions. The complaint by the National Labor Relations Board outlines provisions in Love is Blind contracts that it deems unlawful. One is a non-compete provision that says cast members cannot give interviews or make news media appearances on their, quote, own behalf or for any third party for 1 year after their last episode airs. We have seen this so many times. Players come
trying
off
to
of
get guests
Bachelor
on our show.
Yeah, exactly. We have to wait a year basically for the producers to be like, they don't have control over what podcast you can go on anymore. But even beyond that, it's about like some players want to start their own podcasts. Jed Wyatt or whatever. I think Katie Thurston fell into this category as well. She wanted to do something like this. Yeah. And she couldn't do it because the producers are like, nope, that clause is in there. We get to decide what you can do in media after our show. And this complaint is basically saying that's unlawful. If that gets overturned, I mean, Jesus, everybody's going to have a podcast while their season is airing.
And they should.
I agree.
I don't even think that hurts the company. I think that helps the company. You're only going to be more publicized.
Yes. Like what
it doesn't make sense to me at all.
I totally agree with that. It's a fear of control, losing control. And that to me means you've got some secrets that you don't want coming out. Now, the flip side of this is when those secrets do come out, if this whole thing goes down and it's like, all right, you can do your podcast whenever you want. You can start a YouTube channel immediately if you want. What can you say on it? Because the other part of this is the non-disclosure agreement. Can you talk about producing tactics, et cetera, et cetera? If that goes away, then we're looking at pro wrestling. Like all the players are just going to talk exactly about the bullshit, the fakery of it. And that's going to be cool. I think that'll actually help usher in like this better era of reality TV.
I think all of these things are better. And I think that the quality of the product will be better when these are employees. And when you're actually giving people like that is what they are. They are employees. And currently they're just being like, it's just like it hasn't been unionized yet. It hasn't gotten to this point and people don't really recognize it as work and et cetera, et cetera. But the diabolical levels of control, they even approve like what parties you can go to. You have to technically say, hey, can I go to this party? Like it's a wild degree of control they have been able to maintain for quite some time. Another is a contractual term saying that if a contestant wishes to leave the show and the production deems that the person's reasoning not, quote, legitimate, the contestant would be subject to a $50,000 fine. Cohen said in an interview with Variety last year that the penalty had never been enforced, describing it as a clause that goes back to the earliest days of unscripted television.
I remember reading
that's
that.
Just there for nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't even put that in there. It's just in there. It just keeps getting copy and pasted throughout the decades. And we've never enforced it. We've just threatened to enforce it to get people to go to the final altar. We've never actually enforced it. Just threatened.
No, it's not real. We don't take it out. That would be.
It's absurd.
It's a tradition.
Yeah. That reaction, we've never enforced it, is like, but it's in the contract and it's in all bold.
You decide everything to put in the contract.
Yeah. And you read that contract. When you sign it, you either read it or you have a lawyer friend read it for you. And they bring that up. They say, look, if you get in a situation, they could fucking charge you $50,000 for this. It's in your head, whether they're going to enforce it or not. You're enforcing it on yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like, what kind of way is that to have people, in quotes, actually find love? Like, what's really happening here is you're starting to see now, it's in the New York Times finally. This is a very public thing. It's right out in front of all the cameras.
It's on ABC right now.
Yeah, we saw a piece on ABC News about it. And it's like the idea that this shit is in these contracts starts to strip away the premise they're selling you, that it's like, this is just an experiment to help people find love. It's like, no, it's not. You're using all these terrible tactics to force them to go to the end of your pre-scripted narrative that they have to get married. And it's all right here in black and white. I absolutely love it. So let's move on. This complaint seeks to make the production companies pay former cast members for any wages they lost by agreeing to those provisions. This could be gigantic, because how you calculate, what wages they could have lost, I don't know. You could get real creative with that. You could start saying, well, I was going to launch a podcast. And if you look at Out of the Pods with Deep D and Natalie, they're making shitloads of money off of that thing. Mine could have been that good. You don't know. So you owe me what they made.
I got an offer for millions of dollars to do this car commercial.
Yeah. I mean, that's a legitimate one. If you have like an offer on the table with a dollar amount that you couldn't take because the producer said no, that's open and shut. But there's this other gray area of, well, these are things I wanted to do and they told me no. And I have no real way of measuring what the success financially of those things could have been, other than by looking at the most successful things in that field. And if I'm comparing myself to Out of the Pods, that's what I think I could have made. You owe me $10 million. Because this would have been on for X amount of years or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how you even get to those numbers.
You owe me clout.
Yeah, exactly. You have to pay bots to follow my Instagram account. I should have at least 5 million Instagram followers at this point.
I should be in the million club by now.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
All right. Moving on. Thompson, who we interviewed on this very show, Gore Girl, Nick Thompson, a cast member from the show's second season, began criticizing Love is Blind publicly more than a year after Netflix aired the episodes about his courtship with and marriage to another contestant, Danielle Rule. In news interviews and on his own podcast, Thompson described the emotional turmoil of being a participant on the show, long filming hours, and what he viewed as manipulated conflict with Rule. The couple are now separated. Quote, reality TV has escaped labor laws, he said on his podcast last year. Reality TV has escaped any kind of regulation. The labor complaint, which was signed by Jennifer A. Hadsall, the regional director in Minneapolis, noted that Thompson had received a letter from the production that accused him of making, quote, escalated falsehoods and threatened legal action over what the board deemed protected employee activity. So that right there, that phrase, protected employee activity, that's what this is really boiling down to. If this complaint goes all the way through, and it is deemed that indeed people who are on reality television shows are employees of the production companies, the studios, the streamers, they are then protected as employees, which means they can talk about the workplace, which means they are owed money and they are owed fair treatment. Those are kind of the big pieces of what a union can bring to the table. And if that's the case, like I'm saying, I think that's like the sauce wars are won across the board for any TV show. If that gets opened up, you can talk about anything you want. And is that going to change how the the TV shows are produced? If those producers know, like, this guy that we're pulling a fucking Chase Rice or a Champagne Gate, knowing that anyone involved in it can just go on a podcast literally the next day if they want and be like, no, they fucked us over. That's not real. I can't wait. I can't wait for this era.
I remember when Nick and Jeremy came on our podcast and we were talking to them, and they were like, they were already filing certain paperwork as if they were employees, but then not giving them like the good things of being employees.
That's exactly, I think, the crack that opened this whole thing wide open was Nick Thompson and Jeremy Hartwell. Hartwell is a lawyer, I believe. And he was able to look at this and be like, wait a minute. For taxes, they're filing us as employees, but they didn't pay us as employees. They didn't treat us as employees. So that was the critical error, is that whoever it was, if it was Kinetic Content or Netflix, filed for everyone on that show for tax purposes to be employees of the company, but they weren't giving them all the benefits of employees. And I think that was it. That's what brought this whole thing down. Yeah.
The labor dispute throws into question part of the formula for a series that has become a reliable success for Netflix, generating spin-offs and international editions. Its 8th season with contestants from Minneapolis is scheduled to start streaming in February. This year, Netflix and the production companies behind Love is Blind agreed to a $1.4 million settlement in a class action lawsuit brought by a former participant, Jeremy Hartwell. His lawyers calculated that people featured on the show were paid about $7 an hour, less than half of the minimum wage in California, where part of the show is filmed. The settlement, which does not include any admission from the production companies that the contestants qualified as employees, is subject to court approval.
In the final paragraph here, Allison L. Belovin, a labor lawyer, said that because leadership of the labor board changes with presidential administrations, there was uncertainty over whether the administration of President-elect Donald J. Trump would take a different stance on the case. So that's why this complaint was filed on December 11th, 2024. They had to get it in the calendar year before the next administration comes in and shakes up who is controlling the labor board. This is obviously a giant bombshell, and the repercussions of this, however it plays out, will affect reality television for the foreseeable future. If this all gets dismissed, which I don't think that's going to happen, but let's say it does. I mean, who knows if it gets appealed to Washington? Right. Maybe it does get dismissed. I don't know. But if it gets dismissed, I think you are going to see not only practices continue as they are now, but I think there will be a little bit of retribution. I think there will be a little butthurtness on the part of the producers, especially Love is Blind, but probably across the whole show. Like right now, what is happening is it's reality players versus reality producers. It's the players basically are, not striking, but they're moving to say, we need shit to change. And the people who control the system, your streamers, your studios, your production companies, are saying, we've done it this way for 20 years. Fuck you. One of them is going to win. And I think even if the production companies win, they're going to be mad that any of this even happened. And for a couple of seasons,
I'm sure they're so mad already.
Oh, of course. None of these people want to be involved in this.
They're like, oh, we made you famous. I'm really hoping that this is successful. I think like part of the problem is that reality TV, like versus scripted TV, which has been unionized, for some time, it has a greater churn of the cast. It's like continuously replenishing, except for like certain shows like Housewives, some of the Bravo shows. But I'm really hoping this happens because I think that it will result in greater product.
Yeah, I would say like what I see the union being for reality performers, it's kind of a mixture of SAG and all the players' unions of professional sports. Because I would say the churn you're talking about is more akin to like a pro sport. Most players that come into pro sports only last a couple of seasons and then they're out. They get injured or they can't hack it or whatever. It's rare that you see like a LeBron James who's playing well into his 40s and shit like that. Same in reality TV. Most reality TV players come in, you get one season and you're done and you don't even get remembered for that season. It's the exceptional players who can kind of like branch out. They come back for multiple seasons of their franchise. They go into other franchises. They go into third wave shows. But that's starting to happen now in a very real way. And reality television production is only expanding. There's new shows coming out literally every year from every network, every streamer, new formats. And so I don't think this is going away. It truly is. I'm just so curious to see how this shakes out. But a fantastic article. Please read this. We just read the whole thing to you, but please go read it for yourself. Draw your own conclusions.
Click on this article.
Yeah.
Give it some engagement. Send it to your friends.
Yeah.
Not Chad. He's already gotten it.
This is the second best thing that I've read in the New York Times this year.
What's the number one?
When I had to go into the New York Times and say that I wrote the George Carlin comedy special for Dudes.
Okay.
my announcement, my official statement.
Top 10 podcast moment of the year.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you for joining us with the state of the game. I mean, it just really, we have never seen something, in my opinion. I mean, it's not even my opinion. We have never seen something like this.
We've been following this.
Yeah. This is the closest we've been to some kind of accountability being forced upon these producers who have made, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in the case of Bachelor, off of the backs of these people who they, in most cases, mistreat. If you're not one of the, selected players, if you're not an A couple
Golden
in Love is
Children.
Blind, if you're not a chosen one in Bachelor, you're going to get wrecked. And that's what you're in the show for. And I think, if you do away with that, the ability for the producers to wreck players, what you have now is an environment where the players, you'll still get the wrecking, but the players will be wrecking each other. And that's what we want to watch. I don't want to see producers
people should be
doing
getting
it.
paid for getting wrecked. I fundamentally believe.
Of course. You should be getting, in my opinion, it's SAG minimum. That's what you should be getting.
Yes.
And then if you come back for another season, you should get to
100%.
negotiate. Again, it's very much like players. You're offered, and actors are like this too.
I mean, sports?
It's very much like pro sports or whatever. You can get season-long contracts. You can get multiple year deals in scripted shows. It's basically like this. If you're on a TV show, you sign up when you sell a TV show or you get in like a pilot episode, you sign a contract that says, I will get paid this much per episode or per week, however it shakes out on that specific show for the next 2 or 3 seasons, depending on how they structure your contract. Then if that show lasts to season number 3, that contract expires and you get to renegotiate. If it's a hit show, you're getting paid, period. If it's not, if it gets canceled, fuck you very much. Goodbye. But you're still getting paid decently. And every time you go on another show, your value goes up. So your incoming rate on whatever that show may be gets elevated every time you do another show. And that should be the same in reality TV, in my opinion.
I'm trying to imagine if like the last scripted show I was on was The Good Place. If they were like, okay, Ted Danson, here's your contract. You can never say anything that happened on the set of Good Place. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, there's no reason for it to be there. Unless you're torturing people.
Yes,
So,
unless you have some dirty, dark shit that you don't want them talking about. That's the only reason to have that clause.
yeah.
It makes no sense otherwise. I mean, the other reason that I can see it being in there is like, as we constantly talk about on Game of Roses, these shows are lies. Yes, some people find love. Yes, some people get married. But primarily, the function of producers in these shows is to create, in quotes, good TV, in quotes, drama. So they will manufacture much of what happens. Like we know in Bachelor, the lead very often selects their top 2 or 3 people on night 1, and it doesn't change throughout the whole season. So the rest of what you're watching is the producers manipulating people into false rivalries or into this narrative or that narrative so that they can pad, 6 episodes in the middle of the season where it's not about the lead falling in love with whoever his top 2 or 3 are or whoever her top 2 or 3 are. It's about these other things that aren't real. And I think that ultimately they perceive as very detrimental to their business. If we can't keep telling the lie, if people know it's a lie, they're not going to watch. Unfortunately, I would point you in the direction of World Wrestling Entertainment. When in the 80s or early 90s, when then President Vince McMahon came out and essentially said on television, yes, this is all scripted, but it's entertainment. And now now that we're openly saying this is all scripted, we are going to entertain you in a way that you have never seen before. And that gave rise to the Attitude Era. Stone Cold, The Rock, Undertaker, like the biggest era of professional wrestling, happened because they admitted it's scripted. I think the same will be true in reality television.
I think for many reasons it will benefit reality TV. Yeah, maybe it costs a lot more to produce your shows, but you're going to have a better vibe when everyone is getting paid. You're paying everyone else.
Yeah.
Everyone else on the set is in a union and it is getting paid a certain rate based on the union and has certain protections, except for these people. And I think you're going to, like, there's probably a lot of people who don't go into these shows after they read the contracts. They're like, oh, well, I can't not make money for a year, or I can't, like, I don't want to sign away my civil rights or whatever. So you're going to get better talent, I think. And I don't know. I just think a better work environment in general creates better work. And I am so pro reality player union.
Me too.
I hope that this takes off.